Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Carolina Conversation. I'm your host, Shammond Williams, and we have a great one with us today, ladies and gentlemen. He hails from the state of Indiana. He came to the University of North Carolina in 1990, if I'm not mistaken. But more importantly, he was a big part of the 1993 national championship team. He was a first team All-American when he left out of high school, McDonald's All-American. He was an academic All-American while at the University of North Carolina. But we don't only know him as a champion, we know him as the voice of the Tar Heels. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the Eric Montross.
Hey, Shammond, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's very nice of you. I only had to pay you $20 to get all that nice stuff said about me, man. You ought to hold a higher price tag for all that good stuff.
Well, this is the one thing that you have to understand. None of that is fabricated. That's all what you've done and more. You know what I mean? I could have put 1994 lottery pick. I could have did all that stuff. But, we talk about your Carolina experience here. And we want to first and foremost say thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be a participant here. We've had some of your teammates previously. And so, with you having a busy schedule, always like to say thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure. I just appreciate being asked, man. It's always good to be around Carolina guys, and you're certainly one of the best. So I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate it, man. Well, how are you doing, E? How's everything, and how is it being the voice of the Tar Heels?
Well, my broadcast partner Jones Angel, who does the play-by-play, would probably say that. That would be his name, his voice, the Tar Heels. I'm in that little sidecar that moves alongside at about 15 miles an hour. But he's great at what he does. It's been a ton of fun. I mean, as you know, Mon, from being around this program for so long, it's a special place and it's a special program, and the opportunity to talk about these young men, to be constructive but not critical, and supportive, and just being around the game of basketball is really fun. So it's been a real source of joy for me. I think it's been 18 seasons, which is really hard for me to swallow that number. But then I look in the mirror and think, well, maybe it has been a long time.
Nah, you look good, man. You look good, and you do a good job. And unfortunately for your partner, us as Tar Heels, myself, we consider you to be the voice. So tell him, just he can be the voice on his time, but you're our voice. So
well, I appreciate that. I'll make sure he knows, because that does a lot. Also, I'm going to need to get a bigger hat because my head's going to get bigger as I keep thinking about that. So, yeah, man. So, yeah, but it's been a ton of fun, and things are good. I mean, living here in Chapel Hill, working with the Rams Club, which is also known as the Ed Foundation, supporting our scholarships for our men and women across campus in the 28 sports has become really important to me. Years ago, Coach Williams asked me to work to support the operating endowment for the men's basketball team. And that was easy from understanding what that meant. But then I started getting exposed to all the other good stuff that goes on at our university. And, as you know, that's sometimes I think even as players, you and I took it for granted, probably didn't understand exactly what was how our scholarship came to be. And so it's been a real source of pride for me that I can share a personal story and have some long-term effect on our university.
That's awesome, E. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. I mean, hey, they always say, to whom much is given, much is required. So you do an awesome job. You've always been a great representation of our program, but more important, the institution. And Coach Smith. Coach Smith most definitely would be proud to see you in those capacities. We a lot of times we're only looked at as athletes in some regard, but a lot of us do have the ability to do other things than just be in athletics. So you've been able to show a lot of diversity as a former student athlete at the University of North Carolina.
Well, I mean, it's part of. I mean, as again, I'm feel like I'm singing to the choir here with this to you because but I mean, you've played professionally. You obviously played here in college, and I think that one of the things that we kind of short sell is the capacity to take what we know out into the business world,
Right.
And a lot of people, do see us as athletes, and the fact is that teamwork and business acumen go hand in hand.
That's
And the
right.
communication styles that we had on the teams that you and I were a part of, the successes that we had, the teammates, the bonds that we made, the working with guys, whether they were best friends or just teammates, friends, whatever the course may be, you're forced to put your hat in the ring and really give it your all to
Right.
make the team come first. And with that, yourself is improved when you're with a really good team. And we were so fortunate to be a part of so many great examples of that over the years. So, yeah, man, it's fun to be in Chapel Hill. It's kind of hard to believe that it was fall of 1990 when I first moved into Granville. You probably remember the same thing. You guys were living in Granville too, right? When you were a
Yeah,
freshman.
of course.
So, I mean, Granville South was that bottom hall had a lot of
Pipe
stories.
City. Pipe City. Well, let's do that. Let's rewind the hands of time. Let's go back to 1989, 1990. One of the best players in the United States, being yourself, Eric Montross, being recruited heavily from a lot of great institutions, having this, the University of Indiana being right there, Bloomington. What made Eric Montross choose the University of North Carolina?
Shammond, it was, yeah, I mean, I've unfortunately, I probably should ask you the same question, a long time along the way. We've known each other for so long, but I don't know if this would be something that you felt as well. But I had the good fortune of being recruited by, the best programs across the country. And the thing that stood out to me was just a real sense of peace with the decision to come to Carolina. Yes, it was Coach Smith, and it was Coach Guthridge, and it was Coach Ford, and it was Randy Wheel, and it was Dave Hanners, and it was our, the folks within our office, the wonderful staff there. But it was also about the school. It was really important for me to come to a really good academic institution, and Carolina is that, and has maintained that and improved that even over the years. And then I tell people sometimes you just get that feeling in the pit of your stomach, like it's the
Right.
right thing to do.
Right.
That was it. I mean, Coach Smith had. I remember on my recruiting visit, Coach Smith sat down. We were at dinner, and he started writing down all the names of the big men, the post players that were in the NBA. And it was Sam Perkins, and it was Brad Doherty, and it was J.R. Reed, and you can go, it was Scott
Right.
Williams. You can go right on down the line and see all great examples over the years. But more than that, it was about the people and the place, and that seemed like a really good fit for me. And 4 years later, I would not have. I still to this day would not take anything. I wouldn't take anything from my time at Carolina.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now let's talk about your class, because you actually were part of probably the best class to ever come to the University of North Carolina. How was it being a part of such an extraordinary class? I mean,
well, the first thing the first problem was that Sullivan was calling me all the time because he had committed he was like, as soon as the signing day was open, Sully was in. He was like,
Right.
yes. And then it was like it took Brian Reese and D Phelps. It took them a little while, and then Clifford Rozier, rest his soul. But
Right.
Cliff came, and I think, at least according to Sully, I was the last one to commit, and it wasn't trying to hold out. But it was funny. Just thinking back to that class, those were guys that I'd seen Derek and Brian for years. I didn't really know Cliff all that well, but those were the guys that grew up, and we were on AAU. We'd see them in summer camps. They were also McDonald's All-Americans. That was
That's
when I
right.
really started to get exposure to those guys. We tell Sully, he wasn't, and so we want to make sure that he understands where he belongs in the mix. But but it was a really, really fun group. You might appreciate the story. Right after our class kind of all announced, and they knew there were five of us coming. Sports Illustrated had done an article on the class, and one of the things that they focused on, of course, was Derek Phelps.
Right.
And Derek's is from New York, and
Yep.
Brian says he's not really from the city, but we told D Nice that he was from the city, so it made him feel better. And he said, and Sports Illustrated wrote this article that said that Derek was such a good ball handler that he could dribble the basketball on a New York City subway at rush hour and not lose the ball. And I just thought, you hear a lot of things, like, I don't
Right.
know, you hear a lot of descriptions of players about their jump
Right.
shot, about their handle.
Right.
That one for some reason has stuck with me. I was like, that was just brilliant, and it made him sound like a superhero, which, I
Right.
mean, to all of us who played with him, he was, because
Right.
he was the beginning and the end. He was the beginning of our offense. He was the beginning of our defense. He set the tempo. He called the plays. I mean, that was so much a structure of our team. He would just Derek is, I shouldn't talk like past tense, but in at Carolina was just a marvelous, marvelous player, and I always was surprised that he never made it into the NBA because he had such ability,
Right.
and could guard anybody. And obviously, you played in the league, and I don't know. Did you play with Gary Payton when you were out with Seattle? So,
Yeah. Of course.
I mean, you played with him, and one of the great guards of all time. And those are thinking of those guys, thinking of our recruiting class, thinking of the kind of characters and players. It was just a ton of fun to be a part of
Right.
that group.
Right. 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 One of the remarkable classes, man. I mean, big time class. And so, how was it, Eric, going that summer, coming to Chapel Hill, finally hitting campus? With those guys, with the guys who could dribble the ball through New York City subway. Uh, Brian Reese, I knew Brian Reese because he went to school with my cousin. Uh, if you know Brian Reese, you know Brian Reese.
That's right. Exactly.
So how was it, man, hitting campus? Having those five guys, and then ingratiating yourself to going to play a little pickup ball. How
Man,
was it for you guys?
it was great. I mean, the seniors when we came in were King Rice and Rick Fox and Pete Chilcutt, and so they were great, the great seniors. And I remember us, like, no quicker than have we dropped off our bags and, like, you know thrown a wave out the window. Those guys were like, "All right, we headed down to the sack and we're going to play." And I remember the first day I was being guarded by Pete Chilcutt, and I caught the ball in the post, and I was like, "Man, this is perfect! Like, I'm 5 feet away from the basket. I'm on the left block. It's my spot." And in high school, I had a little turnaround jump shot, kind of fading
Right.
away, what have you. We hadn't learned anything about Coach Guthridge hadn't sunk his fingers into us to teach us post play. yet from a Carolina perspective. And I remember turning over my right shoulder and taking a little jump shot. And well, I thought I was taking a jump shot. Man, Chili smashed that ball straight back at me so fast. And I'm sitting there going, he's like 6'8".
Right.
He might be stretched out. He might get to 6'8.5", and I'm 7 feet. And I remember that play, and I thought, man, welcome to college, huh? It was just a different deal. But pretty quickly you recognize just how encouraging and how important it is to have guys to look up to and to play in front of, let you ease along. I don't know, Mon, maybe you were totally at home playing 30 every single minute from your freshman on, but for me, it was so important to watch Pete and watch our team play as a freshman. And I get 18, 20, maybe 25 minutes a game, depending upon the situation. But that gave me a chance to grow, and it also gave me a chance to watch and learn because, I don't know the right way to describe it from a guard's perspective, but from a big guy's perspective, it's like you're going from high school to guarding a senior, you're guarding a grown man.
That's right.
And so it's very difficult to think about the contact that you're picking up in the middle part of your body. It's about how to defend, having enough upper body strength to manipulate and defend those guys as they're trying. At that time, it was kind of the old school back to the basket post play.
That's right.
And so having the ability to navigate that was really difficult. Of course, you played with Kemp and Detlef Schrempf and those guys out in Seattle as well. And, those guys were so good at that. But it was a great opportunity to learn. It was a great time to be at Carolina. The team was rich with personalities and just good people, man, and people that were really focused on a goal to win.
Right. And so, like you alluded to earlier, you got a chance to play 18 to 25 minutes a game as a freshman. How was that freshman year for you guys collectively as a team? A really great team. I mean, of course, you have a lot of great young players in yourself and the class that came in with you, but you also had some great leadership, and like you said, King and Rick and Chilcutt. And so, how was that team for you that season?
Yeah, man, it was a whirlwind. I mean, I'll tell you. I mean, people ask about the freshman year. I'm like, I barely can even remember the freshman year because everything was moving so fast. I'm like,
right.
Everybody I played against was better than anybody I'd ever played against, and
right.
Academic wise, it's like they tell you to read 3 chapters between Tuesday and Thursday, and you recognize that if you don't, you're so far behind.
That's
It's
right.
just, you really, it's an adaptation, a lifestyle adaptation, just to get yourself in a place where you feel like you can succeed and really focus on things. We made it to the Final Four. Hubert was Coach Davis now is, but we'll still call him Hubert because that's how I think of him right now. And
right.
as a junior on that freshman team of ours, and great player, really good shooter, dynamic, could drive the basketball. But we went to the Final Four and lost in the in the Final Four, and it was in Indianapolis where I grew up.
Right.
And I think at that point, it wasn't the loss was hurt, but as a freshman, I don't think you really understand fully what goes into reaching the Final Four.
Right.
And so the full weight of the loss, I didn't have as much invested as Rick and King and Pete and Hubert.
Right.
And our class didn't. I mean, of course, none of us wanted to lose, but it's a different thing when you have years invested in that. And so we got a lot stronger from that. We got smarter. We were able to really learn from a lot of situations. And then, of course, there was a young and upcoming guy named George Lynch who was just one of the most incredible teammates I've ever played with. And he was, he was also chomping at the bit to get better. So We did in pretty short order, but that freshman year was a blur.
Right, right, right. And so there it is, playing 18 to 25 minutes and having an opportunity to be a part of a team that goes to the Final Four. Now you're moving into your sophomore year. Now, a lot more is going to be placed upon your plate. I mean, this is the reason why, Coach Smith wanted you there to have, somebody that can stabilize the interior defensively as well as offensively. And so now a lot more responsibility is going to be placed upon your plate. And you guys are now sophomores. You have a lot more experience. And so how was it moving into that role? I know it was going to be a big year for you and Derek, because I think Derek was going to finally get the keys, to the machine,
Yeah.
and you being, the interior focus. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with that as well. So, what was your mentality moving into that sophomore year?
Well, I think, we were so hungry, Mond. I mean, it was, coming off the Final Four again, even as a sophomore, it was hard to recognize what that level of achievement was. You kind of just thought, oh, okay, well, in my mind, it's like I'm in high school, win a state championship. Our team is always good. I move into college. We go to a Final Four. All
Right,
right, cool. Like it's just going to be a natural course of events, and then you start to recognize, nah, it's not all. That's not always the case.
right,
And so we were still learning. I mean, I still think back, and still think back to our team, and we were still learning. We were developing physically, mentally. We were learning the system better and better. As you said, Derek was becoming a really wonderful on court floor general or quarterback, call it what you will.
mm-hmm.
George was in his junior year and probably a good, definitely at least a full year ahead of us developmentally from a basketball standpoint. Hubert, as a senior, was the single sole senior, and he was a guy that was not a real vocal leader. Our junior class was even more vocal. We had a big junior class with 5 folks on that
Right,
team and on that class. So there was still a lot of growth happening. But as you also know, I know I'm saying that a lot, but you've walked the same walk, right? We've
mm-hmm.
walked the same kind of thing. So
Right,
what you realize is that with experience, knowledge, and we're all of a sudden in the trenches and getting the heavy minutes and also recognizing what it takes as a team. And meanwhile, we're trying to take care of a younger class that's coming in behind us to make sure that we're giving them the right steps as well.
right, right, right. And so, how was that season? How did you guys do that season? Um,
So it was up and down, man. I think our final loss been in the Sweet 16, and we were a good team. We weren't a great team. Um, we were a team that still had, again, we were relying a lot on young players.
right,
As I said, we had a really good scorer with Hubert. We had good defensive players in the junior class. Henrik Rodel, one of those guys that was getting a lot of minutes.
that's
A
right.
couple of 7-footers in Salvadori and Wenstrom that
Yep,
were there as well. Scott Cherry in the backcourt also, who was not getting as much playing time, but and then George Lynch, who was, you know, like I said, he was definitely one of the best players that I've ever played with as a teammate, as a player. He was reliable. He was gutsy. He pushed you. And so that year was a good growth year for us looking on it. I think I say that with confidence because I know what came next, in our junior year. But
mm-hmm.
I felt like we were disappointed that we didn't make it back to the Final Four, but in some ways, I think we also recognized just what it was going to take. and that was a big deal for us.
Right, right. And so there it was, losing in the Sweet 16, but having more of an impact on the team because more was going to be asked upon you as sophomores. And there you are, going into your junior year. Now you're an upperclassman. Now you're upperclassman. And
that's a good feeling, by the way. You know that.
yeah. When you're
you get a little
upperclassman,
more street cred when you're an upperclassman.
no question, no question. Things. When there's issues, they tend not to find you as much.
That's right.
They tend to find those younger guys a little bit more than yourself. And so there it was. You guys had done a good job. I mean, because it's not easy to get to the Sweet 16. Though you made it to the Final Four as a freshman. And like you said before, a lot of times you don't understand how hard those things are. And so there it is. You guys are going into your junior year. George Lynch and Henrik and Scott, those guys are going to be Matt, those guys are going to be seniors. This is their last hurrah at it. And for you guys, you have played a lot of minutes now, and now you're upperclassmen. And so what was the mentality going into that junior year, knowing that, you weren't comfortable or satisfied with where you finished the previous year at Sweet 16? What was the mindset for yourself and the mindset of the team?
Yeah, so Shammond, I think for us, I remember sitting in the locker room in a team meeting with coach the day before practice started, and it was just players and coaches and managers, and I remember discussing, Coach Smith was talking about setting goals for the season, and I think about this a lot now. I think a lot of teams obviously say they're going to be national champions, but they're probably only legitimately a handful that really have the pieces that can make that work. And we decided, as it had a strong senior class in front of us, had a mature junior class. At that time, Clifford Rozier had transferred to Louisville, so it wasn't the right fit for him. But we still had Sully and D Nice and Brian Reese, and so we had a really strong class. Kevin Salvadori had redshirted, so he was technically a part of the junior class at that point in time. And so we thought we had a legitimate chance to win it. And I remember that Coach Smith, the next day we came in and he pasted in our lockers an 8x10 picture, and he said, superimposed on there, and we were hoping to play in New Orleans in the Final Four in the Superdome. And on that picture, it said, University of North Carolina 1993 NCAA champions. And that picture was taped in our locker on the mirror. And guys, I don't ever remember anybody taking it down. Now, it may have fallen down, somebody may have put it in their locker, but I remember that living in the corner of our mirrors all year. And it wasn't something that we always talked about. In fact, I don't know that we ever talked about it other than the first day that we saw it. And but it was a constant reminder of what's our ultimate goal. And it ended up, obviously, that year we played Michigan in the championship game, Kansas before that. But we started our season in the Rainbow Classic in Honolulu and played against Michigan and lost to them. And they beat us Jalen Rose beat us on a floater coming right down the lane. One of those little cute shots like you guards like to make. And it was crushing. Like, I remember that was probably the first time where I went into a locker room and was just so disappointed and so sad and so just like crushed that we had lost. And I don't know if that's the growing up process, if that's the leadership process, how you describe it, but it really hit our team because it was such a good team that we were playing against in Michigan, and we had played really well, but not well enough. And I think that, looking back at that year, people will say, was that a revenge? You use that as a motivator all year. That wasn't it at all. It was just, it was a stepping stone for us to get a lot better and to focus on the things that we had to focus on to get better. And so, our defense got really good. I mean, we make fun of G Lynch because we're like, that guy, you could call any defense and he would break it. If you're in simple man, well, he's gonna run and trap.
Trap.
If and the problem was he was so good at it that Coach Smith was fine with it, which was crazy to us. Because if I had tried that, I would have, Eric, don't you? What are you doing? Get back in the middle.
That's right.
It's like, but we all kind of cued off of George on defense. You have Derek at the top, and he's locking guys up, but then George just goes off and finds ways to really bring a different, unique spirit to the game, and we just all fed off of him. And then, Brian Reese could knife through anybody, excuse me, and he could elevate so well. We had a lot of other good defenders, but that entire season was about defense and preparing ourselves to be accountable to one another.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like the baseline. We knew we had each other's backs no matter what. And I think a lot of people say that, and it sounds kind of cliche, but if I rotated out of the middle, I knew with 100% certainty that Derek Phelps was going to drop back. And so many times he intercepted a pass just being on the backside and being in the right place at the right time and being consistent. So that team obviously went on, and, Shammond, that was just an epic journey, and so special because we got the thrill of a lifetime.
Yeah. And so how was it for you, E? Been a state champion, making it to the Final Four, Sweet 16. Now here it is. You at the beginning of the year, Coach Smith said you'd be there in the Final Four. You guys made it to the Final Four. Now you make it to the championship game. And, we see the play all the time. I mean, it's one of the most historic plays that's ever made in college basketball. The timeout by Chris Webber. On the floor, what was your thought process when you saw him call timeout?
Yeah, so great question, and let me back up just a minute because we get to the Final Four, and the first game we play is against Kansas again. That's who we had lost to as freshmen, and so we play Kansas, and we win against Coach Williams. Obviously, move on to play Steve Fisher and this incredible group of players that Michigan has. I mean, Weber and Howard, both just incredible post players. Jalen Rose, Jimmy King. I mean, you can just keep going right down the line. And they were us coming into college. Like they were that top recruiting class.
Yep.
But they were probably better than us. Like Weber was so much better than me. He was just so skilled. And so I think what it made us focus on was, this is about the good news was that this is a 5-on-5.
Right.
And this was who's the better team.
Right.
And the better team was us. But to go into your the moment that a lot of people remember, I've known Chris a long time, and knew him before going to school, knew him of course throughout school, and then in the league, and since that time as well. And he's just one of the greatest guys and one of the very best players. And I always really hated that moment for him because, I think if you try and put yourself in that situation, to have, that's a moment where you can say, yes, practice, repetition, recognition of time and score and timeouts. But I hated that for him because in my mind, that wasn't the difference of the game. That helped us.
Yep.
helped us in a big way, right? I mean, Donald Williams was going to go in there and knock down those 3-pointers. And excuse me, the free throws, I was thinking of his 3-pointers because there's a picture of Donald Williams, a caricature. I'm going to go off on a tangent. And his hand is on fire.
Right.
It's like, a thing or two about being a shooter, Shammond. So, he was feeling, I think about him in that game. I think about the fact that we had fouls to give. I think back to time management and how great Coach Smith was at that, and how at the end of games we never got nervous. It was just
Right.
like we just rolled right into it. So, to say definitively we would have won without that, I don't know that we can. I also don't think that you can't.
That's right.
I don't think you can make that. It just, the game is too complex.
That's right.
And so that was a moment where the first time I recognized, I knew they were out of timeouts, but I think it all clicked in my head. I was actually checking in. Coach Smith had done an offense-defense switch.
Right.
And so we were on defense, and I was at the scores table to go back in. And I looked down and saw Coach Ford jump in the air. Now, you and I both know Coach Ford doesn't have any hops. And I swear he was way off the ground.
No question.
And so I remember, and Coach Guthridge was like right there next to him. Gut was jumping too. Everybody was like, "Hey, that's a technical foul." But I think back to that moment in that game, and it's like I'm there right now. Like I can get back there just like that, because those memories, those emotions, the time that you put in to be in those situations, they're easy to get back to.
No question. No question. And there you are, national champion, and having a great basketball team and being a national champion and being an intricate part of that first team all ACC and all those types of things in that season. You had such a great season. Were there any thoughts about maybe leaving early and going to the NBA, going into that summer, after winning the national championship, Eric?
Yeah, Coach Smith, you always heard if you win a national championship, if you play a big part of that, if you have a good game, it looks good in the eyes of the pros. And at that point in time, I recognized that I had an opportunity to be a pro. And but I remember Coach Smith telling me, he said, you can go and you can probably get drafted in the top 10. He said, so that's your call. Like, it needs to be you that makes that decision. And I didn't even walk out of the office. I was like, I'm staying, because I think that what I knew was that one, I was going to get another year of Coach Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Two, my degree was really important to me, and I wanted to go ahead and lock that up.
Right.
And three, I thought, that still feels like a pretty big step to get there. Even though I was confident in my abilities, it was still a big step. And so, and I love being in school, and it was different then. Like, that was not the end all be all. Like, it wasn't going to be the end of the world, or people weren't going to say, why, begging you to go. It's like, it's your decision.
Right.
And now you got a lot of chatter, a lot of guys in guys' ears telling them how, this and that. But I knew that I would be a better player and in a better place to go if I went ahead and came back to school. So I did. That was a quick conversation. But I always appreciated Coach Smith saying, it's your decision. And to be honest with me and say, yeah, you can be a lottery pick if you go.
Right. And so there it was. You made the decision to come back to the University of North Carolina for your senior year for numerous reasons, and a lot of the reasons bigger than basketball itself. And end up being on probably the most talented team the University of North Carolina has ever seen, in my opinion. If I had a vote, that was the most talented team ever. Because now you have those great players in yourself and the guys who you had come in with. You had Donald Williams, you had Calabria, you had Swicker, you had a lot of talent. And then you have these three guys come in by the name of Rasheed Wallace, Jerry Stackhouse, and Jeff McInnes. How was it being on the most talented team that the University of North Carolina has ever seen? And I actually was there at your first practice that year. B. Reese got hurt, stepped on somebody's ankle in that practice. I took my visit that weekend. It was the first practice of the year. But for you, how was it being on that team and knowing that you had just won a national championship and having this talent? I know, of course, you were thinking, hey, man, we can go back and win it again.
Yeah, for sure. So, obviously, that's the natural expectation. It's like looking at last year's team going to the Final Four and thinking, man, it's a plug and play for this year's team to be
right.
Even better because those guys are a year older. And, I think what it shows you is just how fragile that team, like everything's so balanced. And you've got to when you take away balance, when you take away a George Lynch,
that's right.
You gotta replace, and it can be some from the guys who were there for sure, but you also, we had found a real rhythm with that team my junior year, George's senior year, and Donald was a sophomore and he came in and he didn't have to carry a huge load because we were all there carrying kind of equal loads, and he was, and that's not saying he couldn't carry more, but he was a heck of a player. And so, I think that it just worked. And so our senior year, we had some challenges, right? I mean, we were the first team to lose before the Sweet 16 in 25 years of Carolina, or like 21 or 25 years of Carolina basketball. It used to be on the bottom of our posters, the poster where we take the headshots every year. And you look down and it'd be like 21 years of Sweet 16 or better. And this was the first team that loses before we get to the Sweet 16. And we're just stunned because, we've got these great young talent coming in and we're all seniors. It's like it's our squad and we came up short. But, that's part of competition and that's part of teams and that's part of athletics. Like the first time you think something's a given, it's no longer a given.
No question, E, no question. And so, there was, you had an awesome, great 4 years, but more importantly, you got a national championship in there, man. That's the one thing that, like I always say, that's the one thing I wish I could have gotten, me a national championship. And you were able to do that. And so, after completing the University of North Carolina, you went on to play 10 plus years in the NBA. And we talked about what you're doing earlier. Now, this is the one thing that I like to ask you. And I always ask this of my guests. It's my last question for you, but I think it's my most difficult question as well. So when it's all said and done, when people go through the museum and they go through the record books and they look up in the rafters because you're in the rafters, and they get to that Eric Montross, that name, that face, that number, big 00. What do you want people to know and to say about Eric Montross?
Well, Shammond, you didn't even give me a heads up on that question, man. I mean, that's
it's got to come from the heart, baby. What do you want them to know and to say about Eric Montross?
I think actually in the museum this morning, and I was looking at Coach Smith's case. Had a small group in there, and and I was looking at the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and I was thinking about Coach as a humanitarian and as someone who was such a believer in people and such a believer in young, and in this case, in our cases, in young men.
Right.
And I think about the impact of the program and this university on me. And I think what I would say was that Montross is so deeply appreciative for the opportunity to put on that Carolina jersey.
Right.
Um, and to play with my teammates all 4 years, and play with a group of men who today bump into, and it's just like us talking today, right? There's no,
right.
you don't have to feel like you got to be like, well, let me get some chit chat in to figure out who Shammond is or who is he today, because I knew him, couple decades ago, longer than that, from the time. Sorry about that, big fella. I drug you right back down into that old.
That's a blessing,
thing.
Baby. It's a blessing.
That's
man.
right.
It's a blessing.
It is. But I think that it's so special an experience to be at Carolina, and I think that I want people to say, you know what, he really appreciated the impact of Coach Smith, of his teammates, of this school, and was thankful for that. But also, he worked as hard as he could to be able to contribute everything that he had, whether it was on the court or whether it was off the court or whether it was at the Children's Hospital. It was never about himself. It was always about the team, the place, the kids, the opportunity. And I think that's how I would go with Shammond is so thankful, because you learn so much as you go through those 4 years of school. And I'm gonna jump on my soapbox now because I completed your question. So give me know that we have friends, we have teammates who left early.
Right.
Man, I wouldn't give it up, not for anything. Looking back at age 51, I know that financially sometimes it's irresistible,
Right.
but those 4 years don't ever get back.
Right.
And I think a lot of guys think that that's an experience they can do without.
Right.
And I hope that moving forward, you and I can help guide some folks into having experiences like we had, because they were pretty special.
Man, that's awesome, me. That's awesome. That's an awesome answer. One of the best answers right there I've ever gotten. And now I get a chance to say thank you to you, because you've always been an exemplary individual first and foremost, but you've always been a great big brother to us, and you've always led by example. From when you had your Father Day basketball camps, and you would get guys to participate. You know what I mean? Just the way that you've always, like, you don't look at yourself like that, but to us, you're the big brother. So it's always interesting when we run across paths. It's like you're seeking us out as opposed to us seeking you out. You know what I mean? Like, it was never like, well, I'm older than those guys, so they're supposed to do it. Like, you've always been consistent in who you are and how you are. And it made it easy for individuals like myself to follow lead, because, that was the one thing that, Coach Smith told me. He said, Shammond, don't ever get an institution any money. I'll never forget this. He said, never get an institution any money. He said, they made enough money off of you already. I didn't understand it at that point in time. He said, but the one thing that I ask of you is to make sure that you come back and you give the guys that are on the team or on campus time, you come back and you spend time with them in the summertime. And that was 1998 and the year I got drafted, and I built my house in Chapel. I started that summer after I got drafted. And
Yes,
from
sir.
1999, when that house was finished, I stayed in Chapel Hill until I got into coaching. But, to have individuals like yourself, Sam Perkins, like you guys were examples. Like, look, he's coming back. And you always gave back. And you always gave back to us. And, the one thing that people don't understand, I think it's one of the most precious things ever. And it's bigger than financial, because it's one thing that you can never get back is your time. When people come and spend their time with you, they can never get that time back. And to see what you're doing, to see how you're doing it, and to see that you've been consistent. Like, people like myself, man, I had to take my hat off to you. Man, you're a great example for us, man. And I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you, because it means a lot to me. I try to beat you before you say hey to me. I try to catch you. You know what I mean? hey, how you doing? But man, you've been a great example for us, and hopefully the kids understand what Carolina basketball is about, and hopefully they take the time, because they get a chance to see you. I don't know if they've got the chance to get to know you like they should, but you could be a great asset to those guys if they take the time to reach out and just follow your example. You're Carolina through and through, man. And I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking the time to be here on the Carolina Conversation. But more importantly, I appreciate the big brother that you are, man. I have nothing but love for you, man. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the Eric Montross.
Well, Shammond, I appreciate that, big fella, and I do mean that, big fella, because you may not be as size, but you carry a big stature, and we appreciate you and appreciate you having me on the Carolina Conversation. Hey, look, man, isn't always fun to think about where we started and where we are, and also what's to come, and I think you, like me, just hope that the experiences that we had,
yes,
for young men, in this case, talking about young men, but certainly young women in their sports at Carolina. But I just hope that they have the kind of experience that we did, because that's how we're here today doing this, having this conversation.
Yes.
Because those jerseys behind you, home and away, they travel. And
that's right.
And it's just really, really cool to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. So I appreciate you, Shammond. Thank you for having me on, and we'll look forward to catching you down the line.
No question. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to make donations to the Rams Club or to help other student athletes with scholarships and things like that, make sure you reach out to Eric by email. And if you're not supporting the North Carolina Tar Heels, make sure you look at the Old Dominion women's basketball team led by Delisha Milton-Jones. We're second in conference right now, getting ready for 4 games to try to win this conference. But more importantly, thank you, E. Thank you for all you Carolina supporters. You have a great evening.
Thanks, Mon.
Thank you, E. Appreciate you, man.